Good morning, Brad.
Morning. I'm looking for the presenter. Is Josh out there somewhere? That's not a good sign. maybe I'll call him and see what's going on. Paula, did you hear from Josh at all? You're on mute.
You've reached the voicemail of Josh Gilman with Stantec. I'm not able to take your call right now, but leave a message. I'll call you back as soon as.
Well, folks, I've contacted Josh, but I got his voicemail, so I'm not sure what's going on. So we'll give him a few more minutes and then we'll see what we're going to do. Okay. If anybody's got the Jeopardy theme song, they could put it on and play it right now. That was supposed to be a joke.
I laughed.
Thank you. I'm not sure who that is, but thank you for laughing. We'll give him a few more minutes and then we'll shut it down, folks. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. Paula, have you were on mute if you spoke last time. Have you talked to Josh at all last week? Or I'm not sure she's even there. Paula, are you there? She's not answering either, even though she's logged in. So stay tuned, folks. I'll see what we can do here. Coming. Hey, everybody, I've got Josh on the phone, so he's just trying to get in right now. So Okay, everybody, I think Josh is in the meeting now, so if you'll just be patient, we should have him up and running momentarily.
Hey, George, hello. Can you guys hear me?
I've got you, Josh.
Got you, George. That's funny. So I want to share my screen, right?
Yep. Big green button at the bottom.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry about the delay. My schedule got tight with the bus and getting the kids out the door, but I have a minute now, and I'm glad you guys are here. I really am excited about this topic as it's pulling up. Share the screen. All right. You guys can now see my screen, right?
Yeah, can you make it full screen, Josh? There you go. You're away to the races. Take it away, Josh.
Okay, great. So yeah, we do a lot of I didn't get to see who all is on the call, but you know, we all do a lot of fixing streams and fixing things, and I think it's really great. We've come a long way, and so far, in fact, more so than we thought. You know, if you think about it, initially when there was a call to, you know, to do mitigation, it was, you know, transportation is the leading developer in all of the states, and man, they just don't, they're just trying to move money. If you've worked with contractors and under the DOT, you get it. They're just trying to move the money and get the work done and get it in the ground. And so it was a headache, right? That it was just too much for one entity. So it was kind of passed off to a cottage industry. And I think now we've kind of turned the corner. You know, we've made a lot of strides in the practice and in restoration with regard to design and construction. There's not a lot of things. There's unusual situations, but we've gotten good at connecting the dots and finding the natural functioning system that matches up with whatever the watershed conditions are. And so no net loss has kind of, as a result of the early policies and the early practice, it's kind of spun out into, you know, offsetting markets in different directions. And we've seen a lot of talk about it. And even recently, Doyle and Levy Martin Doyle and Rebecca Levy talk about in streams of revenue, they talk about equivalence versus uncertainty and how, you know, getting assurance for that's really challenging in the markets that we have, and all the variability that results. It doesn't leave a warm, fuzzy feeling. It creates a lot of tension when doing work. Oh, well, we did this in that district, or we did that in this state, and it was okay. But I figure, you know, when I think about it, I'm like, rather than try to, you know, sit across the table and argue or come up with more precise methods or oh, here's a better surrogate indicator, here's an index of success, which is really hard to come up with. I mean, our understanding of nature is very linear, and it's a little more complex than that. So I think avoiding and minimize is an excellent practice. You know, when we hear avoidance and minimization, oftentimes we're like, oh, move the line, you know, move the alignment or move the boundary, or, you know, let's just stay away from that. And that's minimization, but it doesn't have to be the passive. We can be more assertive with avoidance and minimization. We can use a light touch. You know, I've seen different municipal projects in different places, and you're like, oh yeah, if you got in there with a little bobcat, or, you know, you get in there with a skid steer and you get that work done, you know, oh, you don't need as big of access. You know, you can just maneuver real easy, but that's not how it plays out. You know, a lot of times we don't get the light touch that we want. Light touch costs money, but it also saves money in the end. You know, replacing the things that are lost, there's a cost, and we're not realizing those costs. So that's where I feel like if you leave it there, then you're reducing costs. Natural resource equals dollars. Leave the resource in better condition than we found it. That's a real thing. You know, I mean, just because we're there doesn't mean it has to be crappy. when we leave, or we got to hope it gets better. We can actually do things to actively leave it in a better condition. And that's the whole take home here today is I want to show you a couple of cases where we did apply light touch and it worked, where we did leave the resource in a better condition than we found it. And that's why, that's why we title it, if they can do it, so can you. So I think this is really a call to action for us to, be better stewards, to avoid and minimize more and more. But that doesn't mean we don't have to do any engineering. That just means we have to do it differently. So here's a case study I'm going to share with you about North Carolina DOT. Up until recently, as I mentioned, the prevailing transportation mindset was to segregate mitigation from roadway design. That way, you don't have to worry about it. The permits can move forward. But like we mentioned, we're better at handling these things. We have contractors. We have pipeline and roadway contractors that are actually learning and doing and becoming sometimes better than some of our sector competitors. Leaving the resource in better condition. That was the strategy on this North Carolina example. This is in Shelby Bypass. It's just west of Charlotte. It's Piedmont, and there's some resources. It's been farmed and it's been ditched and it's been, forested, farmed and ditched. That's really in bad shape. And so, there's enabling legislation in North Carolina and the local regulatory guidance letters that says you can relocate a stream as a means to avoid and minimize. So on this project, we had about 1,500 included a 1,500 linear feet of degraded streams. That wasn't all of the impacts. That was just one area of the impact. So the impacts were offset. They did use mitigation. They didn't dodge mitigation. They didn't, they purchased mitigation. But in addition, they also the project sponsor DOT, North Carolina DOT, also performed this relocation as one of their mitigation actions. So the relocate and functional uplift of adjacent impacted reaches. So here's part of the project. Can you guys see my arrow? Brad? Anyone?
Yes.
Okay, I was like, can anyone hear me? Am I on the call? That's happened before. So this reach here that's circled in yellow, that's a full-on impact, right? So we weren't going to try to get away with trying to avoid and minimize. They're going to have to put a cross line here, a culvert, and that's sad, but we came up with some good things. But these little areas are where you can see the roadway slope stakes would come right about here. And so you can see the portions in red of the stream that we're going to get nuked. The purple lines are just where we collected data. And the green lines are special resources, I think wetlands, in fact. And then also down here, you can see that these pieces of it are affected. And so as a result, but this piece right here, we're not trying to mitigate that. They're blowing up it's tortuous and it's in bad shape, but they're just basically going to pipe that another cross line there. So we do have impacts that have to get offset during using conventional mitigation, but we also have these. And this avoidance minimization, I'm not sure about you guys, it's unusual practice for North Carolina DOT. And this project is probably one of the single largest relocates they've done. It got shelved for a while, but here, look, this is downstream at this confluence here. There's another trib here. And it's pretty wrecked. You can see it's been choked up with sediment, and it's historically there might have been some incision, but there's clearly some lateral migration. And in fact, way down here, Mr. Beaver has a pond, and so how that can stimulate the lateral channel migration and start banging into these valley walls. You get some horrible sediment supply, some if you look at it from an SQT method, the big four, we've got we do have some access to floodplain, but it is incised, and we lateral instability is there. Our bed form diversity is crap, and our vegetation, you can see, is crap. So this is already there. Rather than just say, okay, blow it up, we'll fix it somewhere else. Let's be good stewards. Let's avoid and minimize. And when we do avoid and minimize, it doesn't even fall into the impact ledger. It's on the side. It's a sidebar. And here's another example oops, this picture didn't come out so good, but you know, we do have some bedrock features in here, and there's, you know, as we walked it and cruised it, there's some neat stuff. There's some decent forest in parts of it. You know, if you go up here, there's some pretty good forest along here, but it's going to get blown up. But we still have good forest here. And so there's still a room in the valley. There's room in the valley that we can just move this channel over and improve it from what it looks like. So that's what we did in each of those sections. You know, we took their connection, their pipes, and we worked with it, and we have these alignments that that vertically and horizontally, dimension wise as well, match up with the flow and the sediment that's coming in. You know, some of the, even though they're piping this section, for instance, this was a huge sediment supply for down here, and you can you can see it in the existing form where it's, you know, tortuously wrapping around itself, and the lateral instability that results. There's also a historic dam down here that's only partially there. So here we are. You know, we're proposing, this is linear restoration there, and here's that middle segment with, there's another trib. So since these tribs are getting, you know, since the main channel is affected, we have to make the trib connection meaningful as well. And same with down at the bottom. And here we go. That's like 1,500 linear feet. Now bear in mind, one of the differences is, okay, two differences is the DOT is responsible for this. This is going to fall within their right of way and under their purview and under their management. Maybe they'll learn to manage streams one day. I'm not being suggestive that they're not doing a good job with their commission, but you know, maybe that'll fall into practice. You know, once upon a time, safety might not have been a big deal when they were building roads. They were like, just pave it, just get it there. Or stormwater might not have been a big deal. And so these different disciplines have slowly been incorporated. I don't think that stream restoration could be compiled into some form of a MUTCD and somebody could just flip through it and do what they want. But I do think there's a lot of things that DOTs could do practice-wise that their current process is a hurdle to. So at the end of the day, equivalency is addressed. We're offsetting our loss. We're getting a stream in the location. You know, the ideal beneficiary, it's the same. It's the same. See, that's a little palindrome. I thought that was cute when I put that together. But it's ideal beneficiary community. It's the same community that's going to be benefiting. We don't have to say, oh, is this in the service area? Are we getting this? It's what's, you know, how many bugs are we getting? We're getting more. You know, we'll get down there and see, we'll get more. It's not going to be reference. We don't have to measure and put it on a scale of where it could be versus where it should be versus where it ends up. It's there. And then the uncertainty is addressed. You know, it promotes a stewardship mindset at the DOT. Maybe they'll start to embrace that. Now that this restoration is more conventional, it's developed a standard of its own. I think the DOTs, many of them are ready to step up and move in direction with us. Here's another example called Lake Elizabeth. This one was inspired innovation, basically a response to Hurricane Joaquin. We needed to hurry up and do a project. There was no mitigation available. And so when we negotiated this, leave the resource in better condition, it's basically taking out a dam. I think I shared this project before. I'm not going to get into too much detail, but it's taking out a dam and replacing it with a culvert and then leaving a free flowing stream there. I mean, and we talked about the impacts, and you know, it's kind of silly when you think about it. You're like, wait, we're not really impacting the system. It was a dammed pond that was jurisdictional waters, but we got through those conversations, and even though we're going to be working with 2,500 linear feet of degraded streams, that connection's important. We shared that with the bridge folks. Actually, it's a bridge, not a box. It's an existing bridge downstream of the dam that failed. And then we're basically restoring this thing back to our strategy is to leave it in better condition. How are we going to do that? We're going to do that by restoring the pre-dam conditions relatively. We don't have the same floodplain. They still have a lot of floodplain, but what this was a storm. You guys remember Joaquin, and you remember the 20 inches of rain that fell in Columbia, and the Broad River downstream of Cane Creek. This is our project is Cane Creek is it went up by, you know, from 1,000 to 10,000 to 100,000 CFS. So it was, you know, it was one of those situations where necessity is the mother of innovation. You can see here, here's the dam. Normally the water's flowing, and then you can see here's the dam's exposed because the water's not covering it, and it breached. So what we ended up with is this big, this is Cumbus Creek, this is a tributary, and this is Cane Creek. And you can see this was all a lake bed. And these people were upset about it, but it's not their dam. And there's not much they could do about it. But in its current condition, it was in disrepair. You know, you couldn't just fix the dam because dam safety had a lot of requirements. So we elected to let the water move through. And the existing system was very, you know, it was full of invasives and Phragmites, and it was just hot open water. And yeah, something would have developed over time. But really, what was really important was, are we maintaining a safe connection here? You know, our floodplain is blocked off here and here. So we basically have a bathtub drain underneath this bridge. And we talked to the designers of the bridge and told them that, you know, this is going to be a risk assurance. We're gonna create a connection that's going to be meaningful, and it's going to provide you longevity with your stuff, and we'll do it your way. We'll do it however you guys like to, but we think it really needs a stream connection. And so we did. We went into their plans, and this is a DOT set of plans, and maybe North Carolina's gotten better at it, but we introduced to their plans, to their specs, to their pay items, we introduced, you know, work that included what's conventional and standard to us, like riffles and pools and wood tow and J hooks and things that we're good at. And so we retooled all of that, the language, the pay items, and kind of got everybody on board. We actually had to sit down with district engineers who were going to be administering the construction and said, hey, how do you think? How do you want to charge, pay the contractor for this stuff? They said, oh, well, we have this book that says this is how you're supposed to deal with bridge scour. And we went through and the calculations resulted in materials that couldn't fit underneath it. And this is the what do they call this? They call it, I don't know. This is the structure that got spit out of this design manual. Oversized stone, and basically they were, before we were going to put a stream, before we talked them into putting the creeks back, they were just going to put a riprap flume. And scour countermeasures is their term. So this countermeasure, there it is. This countermeasure was just too big, and it just there wasn't enough clearance underneath the bridge to get the size material class E. And so we said, oh, well, we can do something different. And so we took what we've learned in stream restoration, and you know, one thing we've learned is we don't need cross veins anymore, right? And so here's a good application for a cross vein. Probably next presentation will be gabion baskets, for that matter. But nonetheless, this took their standard output, and we modified it with some structures that we liked, and we sized this stone down and said, yeah, you're going to get a little bit of scour or a little bit of, you know, nuances in this channel bed through here. It's not going to be a paved scour countermeasure, but we had enough depth, and we had enough of their conventional stuff that they liked it. It worked out. So now Cumbus Creek, you can see how it's naturally established up here, and it wasn't until down here that we were able to implement the stream restoration treatments. But you know, compared to before, what it was, I mean, this is the scour countermeasure. This is the top of it. You know, it started right here. It starts right out here. And so I should have gotten more pictures, better pictures, but this is the top of it. And this is all, this is armored all to Bajudith, more than I wanted to. And then this right here is really neat, because here's a wetland right here. It's this wetland right here. And it outlets, we did armor this outlet where outlets and connects just downstream of this feature here. It connects right there. But at the end of the day, man, I go out there and there are more butterflies and birds and all kinds of stuff that I don't even know. And I get lost in this swamp, just walking around and checking it out. It's way better off. You know what? I couldn't tell you how many more species or how many deeper populations or, we could do a science project out there, but we didn't. And that's the beauty of this avoidance and minimization is you fix what was there. And if you want to do a science project, you can, but if you avoid and minimize, you don't even have to buy the land. So what this did at the end, we have new dialogue at the DOT. They want to do things. Their environmental office is like, oh, well, here's another dam removal we need to do. Can we do it more naturally? Or here's a proposed bridge. Can we, it's a new bridge or we're replacing a culvert with a bridge. So they're actually bringing stream stewardship into the conversation. We did leave the resource in better condition. Would it have been fine on its own? Maybe. I don't want to take that chance. I know we know enough to at least put a cast around it and let God heal it. And the benefactor community, again, it's the same place that was affected before by the dam. So it's a great example of avoidance and minimization, and the environment of responding to the emergency was really the stimulus of all of that, and having that knowledge base through decades in the industry of streams. Here's a last example. It's oil and gas. Hey, Brad, could you interrupt me if you need to?
I'll interrupt you. Don't worry.
Okay, so this is a good one.
Yeah, Josh, we're okay. There is no inspirational talk this morning, so you can go as long as you want, and the people can drop off if they've got.
That's cool, because I was hoping to talk more and hear if anybody else had similar stories. This example, I like it because it's private and it's oil and gas, and we have there's a lot of stigma when you say oil and gas, but the people I worked with were really good. This was culturally driven by a state resource agency. I'll tell you, the people in the upper Midwest really appreciate their water, and a lot of them so much so that they'll do more than they have to if they think it's going to keep them from doing less than they have to. And so we went in up there and assessed their impacts and counted, the types and the quality and the amount of different systems that were potentially being impacted by the alignment of oil and gas. And we said, oh, well, you could shift it here or you could do that. And you know what? Honestly, by the time we look at it, those alignments are pretty set. It's hard to move anything in avoidance and minimization. So we angled toward more of a light touch. That was our A&M strategy. Light touch. You're putting a pipe in the ground. No such thing, right? Leave the resource in exact condition. So the good thing about that was it was going to be the same as it was when we left. The bad thing is some of these streams weren't exactly in a great condition when we got there. So, but basically this was this turned into a zero impact permit. Zero impact suggests that you're not doing anything wrong, but you are. There's an inherent take there, and the agencies know that. And at the end of the game, the agencies have come back by and sweeping up have said, well, this isn't quite zero, or that's not quite zero. So we are getting mitigation actions as an offset. We didn't successfully fully zero without performing mitigation, but I think that's good. It's good to use all the tools in the toolbox. So we had over 55 water body crossings. This was in one state, and typically 50 linear foot per crossing. And then minimizing the footprint and temporal disturbance was how we were going to do this light touch. They got into the streams and they did the work in 48 hours. So they basically, the impact, the impact is when you have a project that just sits there and the contractor's not moving for whatever reason, you see the impacts happening, and then there's rain, and then there's this, and then the weeds show up. I mean, there's just a lot of things. The longer you're there, the worse the impact. So that was part of our strategy, is like get in, get out, and make it as good as it was when we got there. So here's an example of this is unnamed trip to unnamed trip to St. Louis River, and this is a nice one. It has a lot of boulder and cobble, and man, it's such, you look down here and you're like, that doesn't look so bad. There's actually a couple of gas lines already underneath this here. It's only into the forest that you don't get the gas lines. So yeah, we're not going to make this much better without adding vegetation. There's a lot of limitations, but this was a good one because there's a lot of sheet pile. There's a lot of stones and a lot of boulders to work with. You can see what's happening is, and also that where they put this crossing is actually an impact that they had to fix up before they left. But what's going on is the water's coming out and it was depositing here. So it has a principal flow path kind of along the left and a secondary flow path along the right. And that was really important because those foster different habitats. So they come in, they put in this sheet pile, but they have to push the sheet pile all the way down and let the water continue to free flow until they're ready to do their work. And when they're ready, they get in there, they get their equipment, they pull up the sheet pile, they back water, and they start pumping it out, and they get right up in it, and they just start trashing it. You know, you can see the sheet pile there. Can you guys see that when I zoom in? Is that working? And this is where the stream originates, from the forested area. But you know, and then look at this, it's all dewatered and it just looks so sad. They get in there, they dig a hole. You know, this pipe is pretty deep. Let me see if I can see it better on this picture. You can see some of the burial. You can see the pipe right there. So their depth of cover is a minimum of 4 feet. So when you're in the channel bed, you're talking about, you know, 4 feet above, below the water. I mean, below the channel. So in order to get that, there's a little bit underneath. They've got a 6 or 8 foot hole in there along the valley walls, and so what they do when they dig it is, and I'd show slides, I can go over it with somebody later. They actually segregate each component of the stream. We have the operator is harvesting sod mats and putting them on the side, right nearby, and handling them as minimally as possible. They're going through the substrate and the channel banks and the bed. And as they go, we're out there just identifying if there's differences. You know, okay, here's how deep the armor is, the sub layer, and here's what's underneath it. And so they segregate all these different materials, the wetland soils, and they don't just throw it and sling it. I mean, and which is crazy because these guys, they're called a tie-in crew. They've already laid pipe all the way up to here, and they left this mess for these guys. And tie-in crews are just like, if you know them, they're just like the renegades. They like to blow and go and sling dirt, but we had them pause and stop. And these were pipeline contractors doing this work. And they were segregating the material, and they were gently handling. And in 48 hours, they would get in and get out. And this is what it looked like before, right here. Before they got in there, it's flagged, and I'm standing on the crossing. This is afterward. Man, that's not ideal, but that's pretty dang good. This is all sod mat. Everything is sod mat. So they got in and peeled it out and put it back as almost as good as it was when they got there. And like I said, they did have to do a mitigation project. They elected to mitigate on top of their existing lines here. They have a variety of gas lines going through this section, which is why it's straight. It was designed as a B little C there, but we were able to get in some C-like behavior upstream. And you can see here we're planting. This was a pretty handy planting tool. We got a hydrator and just connected to a hose, and the hydrator is like you just poke it in the ground, and then you just drop your live stakes in there, and it worked out. It was pretty handy dandy. So even though oil and gas, they didn't want to do any mitigation, they wanted zero impact, they got their contractors out there, their people, and they actually constructed a small mitigation site on their line, even though they did a light touch. You know, that the state agency was the I think this is a duplicate slide, but they did what they said they were going to do. And now they're working out the details. There's some areas where like, is this 100% this? No, not quite. But so that gives the agency some leverage at the table. And then now that the line is in the ground, the pipeline folks just want to close their permit as bad as anybody. They just want to shut it down. So the agencies still have a little room, a little latitude at the end of the game to kind of push and pry and pick up some things. But it was a bold move for them to come in and offer a zero impact permit. I was impressed. When I heard about it, this was 8 years ago, we started this. I was like, that's ridiculous. There is no zero impact. If you want zero impact, don't put a pipe in the ground, but it's pretty dang close. I was impressed. And here's the deal. You're out there talking to contractors, labor union folks, I mean, people who are just in such a fixed mindset of what they do, and they do it really well, but you're sharing, and they're learning. And the supervisor and the crew chiefs and the laborers and everybody. And so stewardship is happening, on the ground, face to face. And so that's really my take home is, Benjamin Franklin was famous for saying an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. He was actually talking about, what was he talking about? Stormwater. Was it stormwater? And how to manage that throughout no, it was forests. He was talking about managing forests and forest fires and forests around cities, which is funny because it was also a stewardship driven statement. But, in the end, this is no touch or this avoidance and minimization. I think it's good to revisit our mindset from fixing things to preventing things. And in fact, that's the way we go out when we look at a stream project. The first thing we think of before fixing things is stopping the stress. What's the stressor here? So promoting stewardship outside of the traditional stewardship community, I think that's important. We all gather on Monday morning and we all know, oh, you guys do this, and I know you know that, and we all know this stuff together. But is our knowledge getting outside of our bubble? Are we? I'm here talking to you guys. How often is it that we're talking to people that know nothing about stream restoration? Municipal managers or people who have water lines or sewer lines or people with power lines. They don't want to be bad people, and that's something we said about the oil and gas project is, it's not ideal, but it was the most environmentally sensitive oil and gas project until the next one. So I felt really good about it, that we were able to get the message across. And yeah, I know people that could probably build a way better mitigation project to offset, and we come up with maybe more value. But this is right in the same spot, and this is actually getting people to understand what we're doing, and maybe we won't have so many dirty diapers to change in the end. So that's what I have. I want to open the floor for questions, discussions. Thank you all. I apologize for being late, but 8 o'clock happens really fast around here.
Any questions for anybody? Please go ahead and unmute yourself and speak. Or
I'd really be curious if anybody's had any similar experience of trying to avoid, minimize by doing that type of fixing. Maybe not for mitigation. Maybe it was just somebody trying to be a good steward and doing a light touch or.
Well, Josh, I'll dive in. It's interesting because it makes me think about where I am now. City of Kitchener, metro area has about 500,000 people, and when I talked to the city about building like a bank, they said, why? They said, we've avoided up until now. We don't anticipate ever having any impacts. So they really were going to huge efforts to try and avoid impacts. And we're prepared to continue to go that front. But then when it came to they had a stormwater program where they were going to go in and do some significant work on streams that were concrete lined in many cases. So as a result, they needed to have some offsetting because they were going to have to get permits. But yeah, their plan was to continue to avoid and minimize forever.
And that's interesting because we do have that here in the U.S. I know I've worked in Maryland, and they do a lot of avoidance and minimization. They do a lot of PRM as well. But how does Kitchener avoid and minimize so well? Do they have the latitude, the space, or do they have the eminent domain? They can go where they want, or do they just have they're earlier. I mean, it's a big city, but it's still a growing city. So maybe they just have the advantage of what larger cities have learned. How do they do that?
Well, they just, they put bridges in rather than culverts. I mean, they spend the money.
Oh, that's great. Even in the South, I was showing you guys an example about South Carolina DOT. They've actually developed some local guidance in the Charleston district whereby the DOT can get acknowledged some sort of a mitigation credit per se for taking out culverts and putting in bridges spanning streams. And we've yet to see that in practice. We haven't seen it fully implemented, but they took the measures and took the stride to get it on paper, to get it onto official guidance, something that they can stand before when they ultimately do propose this. And that's mitigative, but it also has kind of a good sense, like light touch, good sense mindset to it. Like let's not break it. I mean, we've broken enough to know that it's hard to fix, and it's, you know, maybe it's easier to just, like you said, in Kitchener, it's in the end, it's probably cheaper to put a bridge.
Interestingly enough, you talk about dam removals on things like that, or hanging culverts and stuff. And so we've approached, because of course, I think I've explained to most of the group before, is that it's the Fisheries Act that drives mitigation in Canada, not the Clean Water Act. And as it turns out, a hanging culvert represents an impediment to fish passage and is therefore illegal under the Fisheries Act, which means they can force you to repair it, which means that they refuse to give you credit for fixing it because it's an illegal situation.
Yeah, to begin with, right?
So they just go, well, you if you want to fix it, go right ahead, but we're not going to give you any credit because basically it's illegal. And I've tried to get
enforce those. Do they hold people accountable and say you
well,
have to fix it?
that's what I've had the discussion with them. I said, that's great, and yes, technically you're right, but my point is, incentive is a wonderful thing. And I said, unless you're going to provide, I told them, I said you have neither the political, excuse me, nor the political will to force these people to fix these, millions of hanging culverts that we've got in the country. But their point is, we're not going to give credit because that would be, against the intent of the act.
That's interesting.
I think it's stupid because I said, we'll even offer it at a ratio like 10-1 or something. Just give some sort of incentive.
Yeah. Here's something, kind of switching a little bit of gears. So, we've got this mitigation industry and we can see, and it's so robust, in fact, that now we've got whole cottage industries of insurers and so on. We've got all the money and insurance. And so, we've drawn all this attention to our mitigation and created an industry, right? In some way. And this is what Rebecca and Martin talk about. And something that worries me a little bit is how well that translates, that market model. We've applied that market model toward water quality units, right? But then on the flip side, we also see where stream stewardship is occurring in the interest of water quality, but not necessarily for water quality credit because it's not one of the standard practices. State highways don't acknowledge it as the standard practice restoration for removal of nitrogen, phosphorus, and total suspended sediments. It's not written into guidance as a standard practice, so therefore it's not required. So a lot of people like, Mecklenburg County are doing stream improvements toward water quality improvements. And so there's some drivers there and there's some cultural changes. It's like, hey, these are ours, let's manage them. And that's good. But the whole idea of like, it's okay to break it, we'll fix it somewhere else. That mindset's kind of reckless and it can be dangerous. So I wonder, with the carbon sequestration, people talking about developing markets in carbon, and, I'm hopeful that we can have this two-pronged approach moving forward in the world where, yes, we do need to offset impacts, but then we also have that mindset of we need to avoid and minimize as much as possible because offsetting them is hard. Number one, it's hard to prove you've done it. It's hard to maintain it. It's hard. It's just hard process-wise, and it's a whole nother little side dance. And so I don't know. I'm not much of a dancer. If you throw too many moves in there, I might lose my beat, my step. So
Anybody else with any other comments? I have a couple more. Go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Natalie Berger. I work in the mitigation office for the Tennessee Department of Transportation. This is a really interesting talk. It's cool to see these more from a consultant's perspective. And we are actually doing quite a bit of this in Tennessee. We are really short on stream mitigation credits pretty much everywhere. And so our office will do a lot of reviews of pretty much any road project that will impact a stream. And we've had some projects where the mitigation is so expensive that it was actually cheaper to bridge the features like what you're describing, which was really cool. We did that in combination with a lot of on-site natural channel stream design to generate credits. And then we've had some scenarios too where we've worked with our structures group just to see, like, can we put in a bigger structure? Can we change the skew of this culvert so that we don't even have to, do a transition channel at the outlet of the culvert? So a lot of these are things that we're trying to do where we're minimizing impacts during the construction portion, because we simply don't have credits to go to. So that's not even an option.
I've seen that in Tennessee too. And I think maybe part of that is early on, Tennessee was doing on-site, what they were calling on-site PRM type projects. I know we were helping them on a couple of them, and sometimes it was really challenging, but they were moving forward that way. And so the DOT was trying to naturalize stormwater conveyances that were being called out as jurisdictional, and they were calling those out as offsets to losses, on site. And so while it was still getting onto the mitigation ledger and being addressed through the PRM and the on-site work, it really, like you said, it kind of drove a bit of a culture. I think you're right, compared to other states and DOTs, there's some elements to their program that are definitely advanced, and they're doing their standard treatments on streams are probably further along than other DOTs.
Josh, can you explain
I'm
PRM,
sure that
please?
Oh yes, PRM, permittee responsible mitigation. Oftentimes it's on a local site nearby, trying to be in kind on site.
Thank you.
PRM, yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. I'm sure a lot of it was challenging when we first started doing it. So road projects have such a long life cycle. So we've got some that are 10, 15 years old that still haven't been built. So once we had this credit shortage, there were a lot of situations where the site constraints were huge. So there's utility issues, there's not enough right of way, there's so many constraints to doing that. And we've gotten to the point now where we're actually getting additional right of way as part of the road project, specifically to do a stream relocation and on-site PRN.
Good idea.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, and especially because the DOT has that authority to acquire right of way better than a bank sponsor who's got to go negotiate with landowners, right?
Yeah, I think sometimes the bank sponsors might have it a little easier because they can pay more, whereas a DOT can only pay whatever the property appraises for. So I'm sure that there are pros and cons to both sides of it.
But there's a lot that goes into those getting that roadway. I mean, that's a big project for states, and there's a lot of momentum. There's a lot of political support, and a lot of people, the landowners might not like it, but their representative in their district has negotiated a little bit to get this project there. And so they're at a point and they're carrying a different stick. There's a good example of where when mitigation is, when stewardship is woven into the project, there's a little more traction. It's a different situation than with the mitigation bankers running around competing against each other. So I don't know. I'd like to think about that more. That's interesting.
Yeah. Sorry, David, go ahead.
No, it's I'm actually sitting in for David. It's Brad Fairley. But anyway, keep going, Natalie.
Oh,
You're doing
sorry.
fine.
Well, I actually thought that what you were saying about the perched culverts being illegal, and so fixing them, there's no incentive for it. That's something that we're starting to deal with in Tennessee as well, where our regulatory agencies really want us to use the Forest Service's stream simulation process, where you can build basically a stream within a culvert. And from what we understand so far, those kinds of impacts, even though they're, it's not as big of an impact as just like a straight culvert, are still going to require mitigation. So we're running into the same thing where there's really not an incentive for us to try something less impactful like that. So I thought that was interesting that y'all deal with that as well.
Yeah, I would think. Yeah, what is it? Is it the software? Is it called fish crossing or something? I can't remember.
We call it Stream Sim in
Okay.
Tennessee. I'm sure that there's a variety.
Yeah, so I've used those, and I think those are great because the assumption of putting in a culvert or putting in a roadway crossing a stream or stream crossing on a road is the assumption is that you turn it into garbage, and those simulators help us to try to lighten the touch. Yeah, it's not an open channel, or it's not the same as it was, but it at least attempts to lighten some of the impacts. I think we've learned along the way, maybe in our banking style culture, we've learned all the different levels of impacts that we can have. And so, yeah, I think that's a good light touch, and that's a good example where we should be able to go to there's a lot of traction these days with methodologies and SOPs and SQT in particular. And there's a lot of things that I'm very fond about that. And I know this isn't a discussion about SQT, but when I talk to Will about it and I say, what about if we go back to the impacts in the debit calculator? Let's go back to the debit calculator. And so my point is, if we're doing things that are going to lighten the touch, we need to acknowledge that at the debit end of the equation, either take it out or to lighten our impact, so. And we don't have to call that mitigation. We don't have to say doing good fish passage is mitigation on a project where you're inserting a culvert. It'll become normal culvert design one day, but for now it might be effective to say it's lightening the touch. Don't hit us over the head with 1.0 loss of functional feet per linear foot by putting in a culvert. In fact, some culverts, if they're done properly, might actually be better than the stream that was there.
Josh, a couple other things before we wrap up. On Shelby, the Shelby bypass, you said they were going to pipe it. Are they using open bottom culverts, or are they just actually really piping it?
They're using closed culverts, but they put on each end of the culvert, they put oops, I'm mirrored here. They put like a lip so that the culvert is, you know what I mean? So the water flows, and that lip is going to be used to put in some bed form. Okay. So we're going to try to build bed form inside of the culvert. Okay. And then we've also designed our streams to try to maintain a good environment for those culverts. And we also got them to flatten the culverts so they weren't blasting out. And we got them to set the culvert elevations so that it was suitable for our downstream work, and then also encouraged a better tie-in on the inlet side. So yeah, there's some measures there, and those didn't get acknowledged as lightening the touch, but we just want to keep right now. We just want to keep this momentum and traction with the relocate. I think the light touch and how that affects the losses is a good conversation. But right now we're just happy to be entertaining something different.
Okay. Any other comments from other people before we sign off? It's gone long, but the conversation's been productive. I want to congratulate you for being the first person to use a palindrome in a stream restoration talk, Josh. I've not seen that before. And one other tidbit is Shelby bypass is near and dear to my heart. When I first started Stantec in Raleigh, North Carolina, they were designing that, and for some reason, the guy who set up the file structure in the directory typed it in wrong, so it's always been called the Shelby bypass. And I'm sure to this day, if you go to the directories in the Raleigh office, it's still called the Chebley bypass.
Oh man, yeah, I'll be back out there Wednesday, and yeah, with Melissa, we're excited it's coming back. So it's a cool project. I love when different sectors behave in a way that matters.
So they're actually going to build it now, are they finally?
That's-
The design was done a long time ago, man.
Yeah, it got shelved back in the day when DOT was getting attacked for buying properties too far in advance of their projects.
Anyway, thank you, everyone. Have a pleasant day. Josh, any last comments, or are you good to go?
No, thank you all very much. I appreciate it. And yeah, feel free to hit me up personally if anybody wants to chat or just say hey, or talk more about this topic or others. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.